Dahroug halfway around the world, from South Africa up to Germany. And Omar is going to join me up on stage, and he's going to talk about optimizing data pipelines for business growth. So, Omar, over to you.
Thank you, Simon.
Thank you.
It's an absolute pleasure to be back. So, unlike my previous presentations where I was focusing more on the business aspect, today I want to embrace my inner nerd and take a more technical approach. But before we start, a little background about myself. I was born and raised in the beautiful city of Cairo, right next to the pyramids of Giza. Maybe some of you have been there. And although the sun is shining nearly every single day back home, I decided to spend the last decade in Munich studying robotics and AI. And I was fortunate enough to meet both of my co-founders, Lucas and Jörg. And since 2021, we have been helping property portals to grow their listings business. How do we do that? Well, we use data. We've been collecting, processing, and deduplicating data for the past 4 years. We're currently active in 20 different markets covering 90 portals. And on a daily basis, we observe around 20 million listings and 1 million agent profiles. The process usually goes as follows. We collect the data. We normalize the data to bring it all into one unified data structure. And then we go ahead and deduplicate the data. Looks simple, but trust me, there's a lot of work behind it. And why am I here today? Today, I want to, as I said, take a more technical approach and share with you the technologies that we use that allows us to help our customers to grow their listings business. And a very important question is, how do you actually grow your listings business? There are mainly two strategies that you can do this. First, you can hunt. Second, you can farm. What do I mean by that? Hunting is basically the strategy of acquiring new agents, increasing basically your customer count. While farming is the strategy evolving around increasing your ARPA. How can I maximize the value that I can extract out of every single agent? And in order to understand how to actually hunt and farm, you need access to data, but not just internal data from your inventory or your CRM. You need data about your competitors, namely listing data and agent data. Only by combining both of those internal and external data sources that you will be able to actually identify the missing opportunities within the market. So, what are the steps to go through? First, you need to write a crawler. But what is actually a crawler? Well, you can think of a crawler as a digital intern that goes through a list of URLs and stores the information that it sees into an Excel sheet. But unlike an intern, a crawler works at scale. So it can visit thousands or even millions of URLs and store this data into a database. However, there are some platforms that don't really like that and deploy so-called anti-bot software that block any suspicious behavior. And considering our crawler here that is crawling thousands of URLs every single day, this is suspicious behavior. And this is why we use so-called proxy networks. And proxy networks are basically companies that have IPs all over the world that you can reroute your traffic through. So basically, instead of having one IP address that you're querying thousands of URLs or thousands of requests through, you basically can split up all of your requests onto thousands of different IPs and thereby be able to collect the data that you need. However, there are some platforms that make our lives a little bit harder and ask for some sort of human intervention to make sure that this is actually a human being. And although there are some companies that can solve this for you, you basically send a request, they send it back solved for you. We found out that with our massive scale, it is not so reliable, and this is why we've built our own software that does a hybrid model. So basically, we send this request to a company. If the request fails, or if we're not able to pass through, we basically send this request to an actual human being that is solving this for us, so we can proceed with the crawling process. Great. So now we have the data from our competitors. The next step is to normalize the data. And normalizing the data is all about transforming the data from different portals into one unified data schema. The reason for that is to be able to basically just run analysis, run similarities between your different data sources. Great. third step, and the most important step, it's data deduplication. Today, I want to share with you how we do it at ProperBird. Of course, there are several ways that you can do it, but this is the way that we've built over the past 4 years and have iterated several times on it. And it follows the following structure. We first start off by clustering the listings. We then look at each of those clusters and start analyzing the similarities or validating the similarities between each of those clusters. We then exclude the outliers and then basically are able to identify how the listings can merge together. And now to the million-dollar question, where do we use AI? Basically, we use AI mainly in the scoring and in the filtering steps. One methodology that we use is image matching, where we basically rely on images to validate the similarities between the listings. How does that look like? We basically take an image, we tune it or fuel it into a hashing function. You can think of a hashing function as a function that basically associates an image with a unique digital fingerprint. We then loop over all of those images, and since those fingerprints are quite unique, we are able to accurately identify duplicates within our data set. Another approach that we're currently experimenting with, disclaimer, this is not yet in production, but I find this extremely interesting. It basically goes through the usual approach that I've showed you earlier, but instead of scoring and filtering the listings deterministically, we basically hand it over to an AI model. And this AI model then defines for itself with high certainty that this could be a match. It can say with high certainty that this is not a match, or it can actually have a low certainty. So what does it do if it's not really sure what the outcome is? It asks for human feedback. And this is where it's super interesting, because then it sends this feedback back to us, or it tells us, okay, I don't know. We can then classify whether this is a duplicate or not. And regardless of our feedback, it gets tuned back to the model so it can improve over time and is able to identify and deduplicate the data better over time. Great. So we've written the crawler, we've normalized the data, and now we have a unique data set. Seems like we're done, but there is one more step that is very important, which is monitoring your data. We live in a very dynamic world where data can change very often. Websites change their structures, so you need to make sure that your pipelines are maintained. And one of the tests that we run every single day is historic deviations. We need to make sure that the data counts over time are consistent. If not, we need to fix the crawlers. Another analysis that we do is value saturation. So not only you need to look at the data quantity, you need to look at the data quality as well and make sure that the data quality is also consistent over time. And lastly, lineage. You need to make sure to get alerted whenever any tasks failed in order to not have any comprised data at the end of the pipeline. So what does it really take to build a pipeline yourself to help you grow your business? First, you need to write the crawlers in order to collect data from your competitors. Second, you need to normalize the data. Then you need to go ahead and deduplicate the data. And lastly, you need to set up a monitoring system to make sure that the quantity and the quality is consistent over time. But beware, this is a quite iterative process. So once you get an alert, you probably will need to revisit parts of this pipeline again. So you can probably hire 2 full-time employees to set this pipeline up and maintain it for you. Or you can visit us at our booth and we can handle this for you. Thank you so much, and I'm very happy to take on any questions.
Omar, thank you very much. One second, let me just bring up questions. Where we go. There we go. Jeez, we're overwhelmed with questions. What is the biggest challenge that you actually face in making this all occur?
What are the biggest challenge?
The biggest challenges, right? I mean, it's like every market has different data structures. Some markets there's like unique listings, some markets there's a lot of duplicated listings. Sometimes those duplicated listings look very different from each other. And of course, you've now got AI taking listings and then repurposing them multiple times. How do you get through all that noise?
So basically the biggest challenge is if the data itself that we're collecting is not rich in data. Like it's not, or basically it's false data. If we don't have data fields that make sense, or if you have missing data fields, it's very hard to actually make sense out of this data. So you can't tune in nonsense and get something at the end. So this, I guess, is one of the biggest challenges, to enrich the data across platforms. If one platform has very bad data or missing data, that we are able to enrich it in a systematic way and in a right way to be able to make sense at the end of the day.
Now, is any of this illegal?
What we're doing is completely legal. We've done our due diligence, we've done our homework. There are some things that you can do that can be very illegal very quickly. For example, saving or storing images on your local database. This is completely illegal. Another example is what you actually do with the data. So if I take data from your website, publish it on my website, this is completely illegal. But if I take data and analyze it to take some decisions for myself, that's completely fine.
Okay. How do portals make money with your product?
Basically hunting and farming, as I said. So we help them to increase their customer count, understand which customers are out there on the market that I'm not yet working with, and who should I prioritize. And farming, basically who of my customers am I not utilizing much. So basically I can understand, Simon, you are posting 10 listings here, but you're posting 50 over there. Why are you only posting 10 listings with me? So these key information are key to basically increase revenues for their portals.
Yeah, actually, I've been helping a portal who's using your product, okay? And they actually have discovered that, and the way to think about it is they operate in a market with the market's got multiple regions. Some regions are more attractive or less attractive to them as the portal because of the nature of their searches. It's very hard to describe it without actually saying the portal, okay? And what they've discovered by getting you guys to actually do the analysis is that where they thought they were reaching penetration of a market, that they were nowhere near the penetration of the market on two dimensions. Both the farming, i.e. they're not getting all the images, or the listings, sorry, from the existing clients, and then secondly, because there were a whole bunch of clients they just weren't talking to. And what this has allowed is the CEO to go basically beat up on his sales team and say, come on, guys, don't tell me you're sort of hitting against a roof in this certain region. I can show you, here's the list of all the guys we don't have on the site. Please go get them.
Exactly.
And it's actually a real life practical analysis of a use case of what you're doing. And if you're running one of these businesses, it's so critical to know what you don't know, i.e. what customers you don't have or what listings you don't have, and you need to know that so you can go after it. For a portal, what is the best practice use case with your data?
I believe, again, it's hunting and farming. This is where you make the most money. I think you've also summarized it quite well.
And it's actually a true real-life example, which I'm happy to talk about offline, but not online here. Are you managing to scrape REA?
Yes. Short answer.
How funny. Anyway, listings will become ubiquitous. About monitoring, is it like Zabbix, or what's the difference?
I am not aware of Zabbix.
No, nor am I.
Okay.
So the answer is can't answer the question.
Let's have a chat at the booth.
Okay. Another one here. Could a complex agentic workflow replace your service or parts of it?
The short answer is no. We can automate a lot in our process, but at the end of the day, making sense out of the data or extracting making sure that the data is actually correct, and the step with the data normalization, for example. It seems quite simple, but it's actually super, super hard, and it really, really requires a lot of attention to detail, because if you're extracting the data in a wrong way, then all of it makes no sense. So I think it's very hard to replace this, And at the end of the day, you need to also do some manual checks. So actually, like one of our biggest challenges is honeypotting, where a website, it doesn't block you. It sends you data, but it sends you false data. So this is, for example, one thing that it's very hard to identify first that you're getting blocked.
So who's doing this? Who's going to the effort of sending you false data?
There are some players that do it in Europe.
Really?
Yeah.
Ah.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. That's coming from the studio audience. Okay. So anyway, we talked about that. So at the end, so when you think about your product, and you said you're working with how many clients at the moment?
We're in 20 countries.
20 countries. Okay. Do you actually work in other segments of the market, automotive, jobs, or is it just purely real estate?
That's a very good question. We want to go into automotive, but right now we feel like we haven't yet dominated the real estate market. We first want to do that, and then we'll probably go into automotive. Because at the end of the day, it's the same questions. They want to hunt and farm.
Right.
And it's the same set of expertise that we need. So I believe at some point we will definitely go into automotive.
And actually a real live use case, and Scott will probably remember this one from way back with Real Estate View, I think it was, where we were trying back at REA, must have been 2002 or something, trying to get customers in Victoria, and we had to manually do what you're doing. And we were fortunate that one of the competitor websites run by the industry basically published, all the listings, the agents, and we could then map the agents, and we could get contact details of the agents. And then I remember we would discover their listings and write letters to their home sellers, so the vendors who were using those agents, basically saying, do you know your listings are not on REA? You're missing out on this size audience. And we just inserted the number of searches being done in that suburb. Talk to your agent, right? So it sort of opened the door. But this sort of competitive data can release a lot of value within a business. Exactly. And you either have two choices. You either go do it yourself, or you get someone to help you do it. And to me, if I can get someone else to do the work, and I can focus on what's really important, which is doing the sales and marketing, then get on with it.
I mean, we've seen it often that people, we talk to them, and then we say, no, I'm doing it myself. In a year, we meet again at PPW, and they say, you know what, maybe we should talk.
Honestly, it's not a core requirement to do it themselves.
Exactly.
One quick question: how much would it cost?
Let's meet at the booth.
Okay. I guess the answer is it varies by market and the complexity of the problem that needs to be solved.
Of course.
You can chat with them outside.
Awesome.
Okay, Omar, thank you very much.
Thank you, Simon.
Okay.